Ryan, thank you so much for being on the show. Very much appreciated. I was thinking a little bit about kind of like, the fact we haven't met each other, but I do feel like I know you so well just based on like your LinkedIn presence and kind of all the work that you've been doing within the ecosystem the last couple of years. So, kudos to you. I don't know. I was just like, I had this statement that came across my mind. I was like, he's like a LinkedIn sales, influencer, like, celebrity. It's kind of interesting how these things work. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. How are you?
Good. Oh no, I don't want to be a LinkedIn celebrity. I, I've been calming down LinkedIn for a long time now, just because I'd rather be in the work than talking about the work. But yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like we've met before too, so
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't know if this was the first time. But yeah, no, appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we dive in? Like, there's been a lot going on in the ecosystem the last, 2 years, right? These ups and downs, and if you think about kind of what been seeing on LinkedIn, right? It's hard to kind of tell what is emotional commenting or sensational, kind of commenting versus what is the reality from your perspective, and kind of you being one of those prominent sales leaders out there right now. What is the current state of like how sales teams are struggling or not, or kind of what's your perspective on what's going on?
So we had a great period of time, a couple of years of like pretty blue skies. Like
Yeah.
you could send a million emails and get like a 2-3% return, and people were interested in seeing products to see products and buying products just to buy products, as opposed to actually have to solve something, run a lean profitable business. And there was a lot of in selling. Like people would buy each other's products, so that it inflated, I think, the uh, the confidence of sales teams too much, and also the valuation of sales teams too much, in especially in like the SaaS industry. Um, so I think the current state is we're dealing with reality. Like
Hmm.
people don't buy products unless they solve major problems.
Hmm.
And if you have a limited budget to actually buy to get your team or get your organization to accomplish the real KPIs they need to, you're going to be a lot more critical on what those things are. You can't buy nice to haves. Some people may still do it, but you have to buy real products that solve large problems. They could solve problems, but if it's not large enough, it's not worth the juice is not worth the
Hmm.
squeeze. So I think that AEs that have never had to do outbound are in trouble because they're being asked to do it now, and they really don't know how to do it as well as they did maybe when they were BDRs, or if
Hmm.
they haven't been BDRs, they can't just put a cadence in, set it and forget it. It has to be thoughtful. Although I think they are very well equipped to do outbound if trained right.
Hmm.
And then BDRs are being thrown in a million different directions and being asked to do a lot of volume, no volume, try these tools, automate this. And I think that they've lost the art of teaching early salespeople business acumen, and how to actually dissect whether they believe a prospect needs us versus we want this company because they're a big company and they could present a lot of revenue. I'm trying to position people back towards, why do you believe this specific prospect needs this? What problem do you believe they have? And I think that a lot of that is lost.
Got it. It's you mentioned something that I think I've thought a lot about, which was, yeah, we went through this like Renaissance, era where people were just buying to buy. Do you think that um, also caused a lot of sort of like churn on the back end, right? Where, especially now, right now, we know like CFOs were sitting there just cutting everything, including mostly humans, right? Right.
Yeah.
It's sad enough, but like I think, was that a function of really great salespeople and big budgets and people buying a bunch of stuff, or was that a function of like people just not um you or maybe the what I'm trying to articulate is more like was that just a function of products that were not delivering against value over time, and then you would see the churn, or is it a combination of everything?
Think it's a combination, but I wouldn't say really great salespeople. I would say kind of the opposite, not knowing why your customers are actually buying. One of the exercises I do all the time with AEs is tell me why they should buy. And 90% of the time, they're like, well, they want to do this. I was like, they want to, but why is that important?
Yeah.
Go down the funnel until we really say, like, what is the ROI? What are we saving here? I think a lot of companies and a lot of AEs have gotten away with saying, oh, there is no ROI. It's not direct or you can't see it.
Mm.
Well, when a CFO is looking at that and they're doing their budget planning and figuring out what to cut, you're going to be the first one. So really understanding the numbers is really important now. I also think there was a lot of products that were made for the sake of making a product, and maybe they solved something, but not a big enough thing.
Mm.
And you know, I was interviewing a CFO a couple of weeks back, and the biggest thing that stood out is that it's not always about ROI. Sometimes it's also about company overall objectives. And that's when something can get to a CFO. And if we know it's helping attribute to that objective, long term or short, you still may get through. But I think that the way things were going were not sustainable, and it was creating a lot of vaporware in your tech stack. Like I know I was selling to a company that spends, I think it was like $100 million a year on software,
Wow.
and the actual person that ran that, it was like the COO, and he was really dealing with like high end rev ops. Didn't know 80% of what their tech stack was.
Wow.
So think about that.
Yeah.
Like that can't go on.
Yeah. That piece of like products just being built to build a product, right? Seems like a lot of what early stage founders deal with, right? And then you're just kind of like, is that a big enough pain point, right? You might in a great market be able to kind of like, get somebody to buy that thing. But in I think maybe more realistic markets, right? You can. And when you were articulating ROI and these sort of things, for me, that seems like just basic stuff, right? But that was sort of glanced over, right? Like, I mean, you're not going to get a great deal. You're not going to sell like, you're not going to sell a big deal if you can't do those basic things, right? And then B, you're going to get churn at some point if someone looks, right? Or a competitor comes in, or a solution that does solve a little more, right?
Think about this. If you're like, all right, I have Salesforce, I have SalesLoft, and I have these 5 other tools, and they're like, well, which ones do you want to get rid of because we need to reduce the tech budget? Well, I'm not going to get rid of my sales engagement platform. I'm not going to get rid of my CRM. So what's on the cutting block? There's a lot of tools I use that I love that I wouldn't pay for, and I get to use the free versions of them, and it gets me enough value. But if you really were like pulling my arm and saying you have to buy this for your whole team or stop
Yeah.
using it, I'd be like, all right, I'll stop using it.
Yeah. Yeah. Loom. I love Loom. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure that I would pay for it at this point. I get 25 free videos in the freemium
Yeah.
version. And every time I'm hitting the limit, I just delete half of them, right?
It's the existential crisis of most PLG started companies is you have a large base of unconverted users. You have longer than average enterprise deal cycles, and you have short initial ACV. So like, I talk a lot about like sales strategies you can use to combat those things, but it's the nature of the beast. So you have to
Yeah.
figure out the deeper why and what problem that could solve up the chain. But I think that PLG puts a lot of companies in this position where they can describe the user pain, but they can't describe the business problem.
Mm.
That's hard.
Yeah, that's hard. I just have to point out that, we're an early stage startup here at Asset Mule. We started it about 8 months ago or so. And it's something we're dealing with every day as we're trying to figure out product market fit, because a lot of time, as you go to market, you can't solve the entire kitchen sink. You don't have a big ROI story, these sort of things, right? So, it forces us to really dig in and be able to tell stories that are, get us in the door, but then also that will allow us to grow over time. And so it forces us again to get a little more strategic and thoughtful. And then so that makes a lot of sense. If you think about the top of the funnel, right? Like booking meetings, I tell you what, like, we all get spammed every day on LinkedIn and email and these sort of things with folks asking for meetings. And I have to admit that I haven't been in the SDR role in a very, very long time, or even as a salesperson who's straight up prospecting for an existing or established product. Like for us as founders, I think we can get away with some of the early stage prospecting and booking meetings because we're pre-product and things like that. And so the ask, I think, is a little less aggressive, or has a little less pressure. But from your experience, and I know I was just actually talking to a buddy of mine who was like raving about your skill set and your ability to train folks. Dale, Dale and Adam.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I was with Dale in the Tampa area 2 weeks ago, and he was just talking about you, and really big fan. But if you think about like booking meetings at the top of the funnel, how are successful reps right now, really breaking through that noise, given all the spam, given all the, just kind of AI now that's automating a lot of that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, that, to be honest, creates a great opportunity for reps that can do it well. Because 90% of things I get in my mailbox or the phone calls I can tell they're not for me. They're for everybody. They're for everybody that's like me. They're really not for me. And I think a lot of people have gone towards, let's personalize it. That's cool, but I don't care about the personalization. I don't care if you watch my videos or saw me on a podcast and are gonna do that. Bring the relevance. For example, I'm a new sales leader at Lob, and I'm overseeing the BDR team right now. And okay, so what are some of the problems that a BDR leader that's getting ramped might be going into? Um, maybe they're trying to hire people. Okay, so ramp time is going to be important. Finding the right talent, being able to train them quickly, make them effective, up level the other reps on the team so that they're producing at a higher rate. These are all things that I'm going to be measured on. And if a BDR really wants time with me, they should use that in their messaging. For example, I had one reach out. It was like, "Oh, you use our software at a previous company. So do you want to check it out now?" And I was like, "This is the laziest way to do it, because what your software might help me accomplish is improve ramp time and make sure that all my reps are using the same assets and the same resources to get themselves trained, and basically extrapolate from the best of my team to the new ones so I can duplicate some of my current top performers." And they just skipped over all that messaging. So I think that the way that reps are really standing out right now to book meetings is by understanding the business and the key metrics of their buyers, being able to use all that and articulate it really thoughtfully in email, phone, video, social, um, instead of just popping out a cadence.
Yeah. I can't help but think all those salespeople who are not putting in the work, not becoming experts in their persona, are just not gonna. It's just not gonna work for them, because like what kept coming to mind as you were explaining this was like I needed to understand like a persona like you, all right, has to know what a sales leader like yourself that's been in a role for 3 months might be dealing with. And if you were there 12 months, it would be a different set of challenges, right? And unless I understand that persona in depth, I'm not going to be able to do that. All I'm going to have is some generic thing like that individual sent you, right? So like, it's just for the sales leaders out there listening to this. I mean, boy, it really adds a certain level of thoughtfulness and education that I think you know only the top sales people historically have been able to really do, and frankly a certain level of care and excitement to be able to do that too, right, to dig in there.
Let your BDRs speak to your customers. For the love of God, let them speak to your customers. That was the first thing I've been doing since I've joined this company. I'm like, hey, what subject matter experts do we have in the business, and who holds this position in the business? If we have someone that does, and then I just said, hey, like, how do you describe the problem we solve? What are the words you would use versus what our marketing materials say?
Yeah.
Would you ever use this phrase, or would you know what it means? And they're like, no, I wouldn't. I would describe it like this. That is the
Mm.
detail that your BDRs want. A lot of the time I'll look through my reps emails and I'll be like, all right, so why is this a problem? And then they describe the real words they should use when answering that question. I'm like, use that.
Yeah.
If that's how they would think about it, use that. Speak your buyer's language.
My buddy Aaron Ross wrote this book years ago, about a decade ago or so, called Predictable Revenue, and he was like in Salesforce guy, et cetera. And one thing he used to say was exactly that. Like, we'd be, we did a couple like workshops and events together, and we'd be sitting there talking to a room of leaders, and he'd go up to them and say, okay, tell me what you do. And they'd say the classic, oh, we're an optimization platform for driving ROI, for XYZ. And, wrong answer. I have no idea what that means. A bunch of jargon. It doesn't. And it's like a second iteration. Oh, we'll have no. Tell me exactly what you do in a way that works for me, right? And again, and I think that's kind of one of the things that came to mind when you just said that, which was, again, yes, speak in these buyers' language, and again, you got to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more specialized. Personalization. I mean, if you write a personalized email and you can't even have this story, doesn't what are you really doing? What's personalization in reality, right?
Yeah, no, I think personalization has gotten out of control, and not in a good way.
Yeah,
Relevance is going to be it, and the only way to do relevance is to
relevance.
understand how people operate.
Yeah. Well, last question I wanted to ask you here real quick was, we're in this remote work world. Sales people, I think, are unique animals. I mean, I think a lot about kind of like when I was in the sales pit back in the day, and I was an SDR and a salesperson, and that environment that excited me, that kind of like teams, almost sports like environment, really, I think, helped me become successful, help in many ways, helped me get through some of the difficult moments. And I'd be able to listen in to my colleague who was sitting next to me and their story, and be like, oh, and that was something that would happen organically. We don't necessarily have that serendipitous experience with remote work, but there's a lot of other benefits to it. Any sort of tips that you would give leaders out there, sales managers, around getting like the best out of their reps within this remote work, and maybe there's a couple things that you've seen that really move the needle.
So the biggest thing that I will like say is I've had a lot of more old school bosses, even in leadership, that have said like, oh, like BDRs, they have to be in the pit, they have to be next to their colleagues, it accelerates this and that. A lot of people that say that. A lot of them have gone through it, or that's how they learned, and that's great. There are tools that can help you. For example, my team uses Nooks. And the reality is, we meet there on a daily basis. We're in the pit together. You
Mm,
can listen into calls that are happening, give feedback, hang out, learn from the people that have been doing it a while, and it is instrumental. Then there are utilizing things like Gong or Chorus and stuff like that, sharing recordings. But you have to create like an interactive culture, shouting out wins constantly, even micro wins. And then there's the in-person aspect. I think that you should, at least on a quarterly basis, be meeting up with each other. If you
yeah.
do that in a remote world, it takes out the edge of feeling like alone. And that's the hardest part. Like, you don't want to isolate. I've had companies I worked for where the team felt fractioned and like isolated, and it doesn't do well over time.
Mm.
So if you have some of those micro in-person type of experiences where you can all rally, get into a room together, it really helps. But do you need to do that 5 days a week? Not at all.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated. If folks wanted to, follow you on social media or maybe connect with you for some advice, what are the best channels or handles to reach you?
So Ryan Scales Sales or Ryan Scale Sales on TikTok, LinkedIn, obviously Ryan Scalera. I really don't do any other social media. I'm not big into it anymore. So those are probably the best way to find or interact with me.
I hear you. I used to be super active on LinkedIn, and it feels like a grind a lot of the time. But anyways, thank you so much, brother. Very much appreciate your wisdom here, and yeah, have a great day.
Absolutely. Have a great one. Take care.